Here is something that will mess with your head a little. Your tomato plant is sitting there looking wilted. Leaves drooping, edges starting to curl. The whole plant looks like it is desperately thirsty. So you do what any reasonable gardener does. You water it, and the next morning it looks worse. So you water it again. And a week later, you are standing there watching a plant that has been watered every single day slowly falling apart. And you have no idea what is going wrong because you have been doing everything right. I have been in that exact spot, and the answer, when I finally figured it out, made me feel a little foolish. Because the plant was not thirsty at all. It was drowning. The roots were surrounded by water but starving for oxygen. The plant looked thirsty because the roots were suffocating, and every time I watered it, I was making the problem worse. This is one of the most common mistakes in tomato gardening, and it is also one of the hardest to spot because the symptoms of too much water and too little water look almost identical from the outside. Drooping leaves, slow growth, yellowing. A plant that looks like it is struggling even though you cannot figure out why. Today, I want to show you exactly how to tell the difference, what is actually happening underground when this goes wrong, and how to fix it without losing the plant. Let me start with what is actually happening underground when you overwater a tomato. The roots of a tomato plant need two things to function: moisture and oxygen. Those two things have to be present at the same time. The roots pull water in, but they also breathe. There are tiny air pockets in healthy soil that allow oxygen to reach the root zone. That oxygen is what keeps the roots alive and active. When you water too frequently, those air pockets stay permanently filled with water. The oxygen gets pushed out and it cannot get back in fast enough before the next watering comes. The roots start to suffocate. They cannot function in waterlogged soil, no matter how healthy the plant looks above ground. And here is the part that trips everyone up. A suffocating root system cannot deliver water to the plant above it. The roots are surrounded by moisture, but they cannot process it. So the plant starts showing exactly the same symptoms as drought stress. Wilting, drooping leaves, a plant that looks thirsty even though it is sitting in wet soil. Most gardeners see the wilting and reach for the hose, and by doing that, they make the root environment even more oxygen deprived. The plant gets weaker, the roots start to die back, and the whole situation spirals. This is why the mistake hides for so long. You are responding to the symptom you can see. The actual problem is invisible, underground, and getting worse every time you try to help. So how do you tell the difference between a plant that is genuinely thirsty and a plant that has been overwatered? The leaves tell you a lot if you know what to look for. With real drought stress, the leaves will droop and feel soft and slightly limp when you touch them. The color usually stays green or turns a dull grayish green. The soil when you check it will be dry a few inches down. The wilting tends to show up in the afternoon heat and sometimes partially recover in the cooler evening. With overwatering, the leaves often droop, but they may also start to feel a little thicker or slightly puffy before they eventually yellow. The lower leaves go yellow first. The soil feels wet or damp when you push a finger down 2 or 3 inches. The wilting does not recover in the evening the way drought stress does. It just stays there. The single most reliable thing you can do is check the soil before you ever reach for the hose, not the surface. The surface dries out fast and tells you almost nothing useful. Push your finger down 2 or 3 inches into the soil near the plant. If it feels moist at that depth, the plant does not need water. If it feels dry at that depth, it does. That is the whole test. 2 seconds and a finger. Most gardeners water by schedule or by how the plant looks. Both of those approaches will get you into trouble with tomatoes. Water by what the soil actually tells you. Now here is where a lot of gardeners make a secondary mistake that compounds the first one. They notice the plant looks bad. They reduce watering slightly. The plant does not immediately improve, so they assume the water was not the problem and they go back to watering frequently. This is where gardeners accidentally keep the damage going. When roots have been in waterlogged conditions for a week or 2, they do not bounce back the moment the soil dries out. The root damage has already happened. Some of the fine root hairs that do most of the actual absorbing are already dead. The plant is going to look rough for a while even after you stop overwatering, because it is trying to regrow its root system from whatever healthy roots are left. The right move when you realize you have been overwatering is to stop. Let the soil dry down properly, and then be patient. Do not swing to the other extreme and withhold water completely. Just let the top few inches dry out between waterings. Give the soil a chance to pull oxygen back into the root zone. The plant will look stressed during this time. That is normal. It is recovering. If you have the plant in a container, this is easier to manage because you have more control. If it is in the ground, you may need to wait for a dry spell or create some temporary shade to slow down evaporation and give the roots time to recover without the plant going into full drought stress at the same time. There is another version of this problem that shows up in late May and June specifically, and it is slightly different from straight overwatering. The nights are still cool. The days are warm. If you are watering in the evening, the soil stays wet through the cold night when the roots are barely functioning. You end up with roots sitting in cold, wet soil for 8 to 10 hours every night. Same result as overwatering. Roots under stress, poor oxygen, a plant that starts showing signs of struggle. The fix is simple. Water in the morning. Morning watering gives the soil time to warm through the day as the roots become more active. Any excess drains or evaporates through the afternoon. By evening, the soil is at the right level going into the cooler night. It sounds like a small change. Over a full season, it makes a noticeable difference. Here's the watering approach that actually works for tomatoes in late May and June. Check soil moisture before every single watering. Finger test, 2 to 3 inches down. If it is moist, walk away. If it is dry, water. When you do water, water deeply. A slow soak that pushes moisture down to where the roots are growing, not a quick sprinkle across the surface that wets the top inch and does nothing useful. Deep watering encourages roots to grow downward where they can access moisture that lasts. Surface watering trains roots to stay near the top where they are vulnerable to heat and dry spells. Let the top few inches of soil dry out between waterings. This is the window where oxygen gets back into the root zone. The plant uses that dry period. It is not a problem. It is part of the cycle. Water in the morning, not the evening. And watch the lower leaves. If they start going yellow and the soil is consistently moist, that is your early warning. The plant is telling you it has been getting too much before the visible damage gets worse. There is one more thing worth knowing about this, and it is specific to May and early June in most growing regions. This is the time of year when rainfall is often inconsistent. You might get heavy rain for a few days, then a warm, dry stretch, then rain again. A lot of gardeners set a watering schedule in May and then keep running it regardless of what the weather is doing. That is how you end up with a plant getting watered 2 days after a heavy rain when the soil is still completely saturated. Check before you water, every time, no matter what your schedule says. If it rained yesterday, check the soil today before you add more. If it is going to rain tomorrow, consider whether today's watering is actually necessary. Tomatoes are more tolerant of inconsistency than most gardeners think. Missing a watering by a day does almost no harm to a plant with a decent root system. Overwatering for 2 weeks can set a plant back by a month. By mid-July, the difference between a plant that was watered correctly and one that was overwatered in May and June becomes completely obvious. One plant has a deep root system, handles heat without wilting, and keeps producing through the warm months. The other one is yellow, slow, and struggling to recover from root damage it suffered weeks earlier when everything above ground still looked fine. The good news is that you can catch this before it gets that far. The finger test takes 2 seconds. Morning watering takes no more time than evening watering. And once you learn to read what the lower leaves are telling you, you will catch the early signs before they turn into a real problem. Tomatoes do not die because gardeners forget to water them. A lot of them die because gardeners never let the roots breathe. If this video helped you figure out what has been going wrong in your garden, subscribe to Plenvo. Every week I put out practical content timed to exactly what your garden needs right now, not general advice that could apply to any month of the year. Hit the like button. It helps this reach more gardeners who are dealing with the same problem. And leave a comment telling me whether you have been overwatering or underwatering this season. I genuinely want to know. and it helps me figure out what to cover next. If you know someone whose tomatoes are struggling right now and they cannot figure out why, share this with them. The answer might be simpler than they think. I will see you in the next one.